Muted, sorry, I'm unmuted. So apologize for that. All right, sorry for that. So so anyway, so this schedule, goes for so many hours a day, and that goes for like 20, 30 years. So when we consider, I think, our way of study, going to uni, getting higher education, it's way more taxing when you look at a monastic, a common monastic academic investment. So that's when you do your studies, and what you study is this set of text here behind me consists of many teachings that the Buddha gave. The Tibetan tradition says that all the teachings that the Buddha gave are included in this set of scriptures, which is called in Tibetan the Kangyur. It consists of more than 100 volumes, and I wonder. This is my always my heretic way of thinking. I really wonder if it consists of all the teachings that the Buddha gave. I haven't counted the teachings included within this scripture, but in the way that Tibetans speak about the teachings that the Buddha gave, they say that the Buddha gave 84,000 discourses. So I look at this set of text here, and I really wonder if 84,000 discourses are completely wrapped, found here and wrapped in this box of text. I don't know, maybe yes, maybe no, but it's still a massive volume of teachings. Then we have here on the other side of the altar, we have commentaries that were given by the great Nalanda masters. So Nalanda Monastery was a big monastic university that existed in India for more than 1,000 years, maybe 2,000 or 300 years. I can't remember the exact number. And it came to an end around the 10th century with a Muslim invasion into India. So of the great masters that have operated in India for more than 1,000 years, 17 masters were highlighted as the foremost masters of Nalanda. So many of their teachings are included here in this set of teachings, which consist of more than 250 volumes. So to become a master of all these teachings, the Geshes, this is the graduation title, the Geshes study for 20, 30 years. And the study is never ending. It's not that when you finish your official education program, that's the end of your teachings. You still continue to take teachings from different teachers. So these are the people that are invested in academic achievement. They're responsible for holding the teachings of the Buddha. Then you have people that are invested in spiritual practice. Now, when I said that there are people that are invested in spiritual practice, it doesn't mean, it sounds as if those two things are divorced from each other. The academia and spiritual practice are divorced from each other. They are not divorced from each other, because when you study like the Geshes do, when you go day in and day out and you study and you do debate and you need to defend your position, you integrate the material into the way that you think, and you do it for so many years that becomes your way of thinking. That becomes your meditation. And of course, you also do meditation at home. You also sometimes do retreats. But then you also have people that dedicate their life for living in retreats. So in one of my visits to Tibet, I visited one of those meditation retreats, which sounds quite romantic, right? To go into a long life retreat or to go into a 3 or 4 years retreat. It sounds like it'd be quite indulging in some sense. You'll be fed, you'll be in your room, you'll be doing meditation, you'll be doing some reading without Netflix, of course, but it sounds pretty, it still sounds pretty easy. But then, having visited a couple of those meditation retreats in Tibet, let me tell you, it's not kind of something that I would be looking forward to, in a sense that, first of all, when you go into those retreats, most people don't have a bed. You have a meditation box where you're sitting in meditation during the day and also during the night. So there's, for example, in the tradition that I was ordained, there is a common tradition of doing a 3 years retreat. So you go into a retreat house, you get your meditation box in the room, and there's no bed. For 3 years and 3 months, you're supposed to be doing every day, during the day, 4 meditation sessions. Each one of them consists of 2 hours, sometimes 2.5 hours. And then at night, you're supposed to be also sitting in meditation and trying to harness the power of sleep also into your meditation. So when I think of living in a retreat like that, for me, I get pain in just thinking about it, I get pain in my hips and pain in my knees and pain in my legs and so forth. Imagine sitting like that for at least 3 hours, and that's going to be your life. So the people that go on to this stream dedicate their life to developing some meditation techniques, and on that basis, they develop realizations. So we have different ways of developing realizations. You can develop realizations through your academic study and also thinking about positions, thinking about argumentations, incorporating them into the way that you think. And then there are those that develop similar realizations, and sometimes realizations that are slightly different. After all, our mind is so limitless, it is so multifaceted, that different types of realizations with different textures and different flavors can be developed. So you have people that are completely dedicated to that, and that has existed in Tibet for more than 1,000 years. So imagine kind of a whole nation that was totally dedicated to developing producing realized people. So then Buddhism made its way to our community and also to other places around the world. And obviously we live in places and conditions that are very different to the way that Tibetans have been living their life. First of all, we don't have kings. We don't have people that tell us what to do. We don't have people that, in some sense, take our resources and force us to use those resources for spiritual development, for being invested in Buddhism. I mean, I have to say that thankfully we don't have those people that tell us what to do, because this is definitely not suited to our way of living. But what it means is that now we have to make a way in thinking, how are we going to hold this massive body of knowledge? So we have the knowledge of all the teachings that the Buddha gave, and also the knowledge of the inner mind, the way to develop realizations. How are we going to do it? Also, taking into consideration that for most of us here in this community, and I mean, not only here at Chinrezig Institute, but also outside of Chinrezig Institute, as we've been here for 47 years, we have quite a few people that live in the area, that have started their life in living in the center or living next to the center, and then turn the center to be part of the thing that they do in life. And also we have people that come and go at different points of their life, and when they go on with their spiritual journey in whatever they do. So how do we then incorporate whatever we do into this idea of developing knowledge of the teachings that the Buddha gave, and also developing realizations? It's pretty hard, particularly considering that most of us encounter Buddhism at a later stage in our life. So I'm quite lucky in the sense that I've met Buddhism in my mid-20s. From a Buddhist perspective, from a Tibetan perspective, I met Buddhism when I was already a little bit old. So I was in my mid-20s, and the way that I met Buddhism was also just random, so to speak. So I was, I went as a backpacker to Central and South America in my mid-20s. I was so taken by South American culture. I was studying Spanish. I got to the point in which I was relatively fluent in Spanish, and my time was up at some point. I had to go back to Israel and go back to work. But I was dreaming of going back and traveling through Colombia. I've read Gabriel Garcia Marquez books, and I was solely taken by Colombian culture, and I was kind of having those dreams of going to all the places that he described in his books. So then, 1.5 years after that, I got 4 weeks off from work, and I went to a travel agent, as people used to get flight tickets from travel agents once upon a time. So I went to my travel agent and said I want to go to Colombia, and 25 years ago it was $1,600 just for the flight ticket for 4 weeks. So I was sitting in front of my travel agent and said, wow, $1,600 sounds a lot of money for just a flight ticket for 4 weeks. That was 25 years ago. Now I guess that it would be easy to pay. I would just easily pay $1,600 for a flight ticket to leave Australia, to go to India, for example. So the travel agent was looking at me and said that, look, India is half the price. So I bought a flight ticket to India. And I thought, why not? I've never been to India. Let's go to India. I had no idea about India. I had no idea about Buddhism, had no idea about Hinduism. And also I was not interested. I was, you can say, not interested, uninterested, disinterested. I was just into backpacking in India, kind of going, traveling, hiking and so forth. But I met a couple of monks as I was traveling in India. And it seemed to me that there was kind of this genuine kindness about them, and it got me interested. Just kind of, it hooked me. Not like completely, but I was just interested kind of in that kind-heartedness. And I came by a bookshop, and there were a couple of books written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, giving an introduction to Buddhism. So I bought those couple of books. One of them was the autobiography of His Holiness, and the other one was just foundational Buddhism. And I started to read those books, and many of the things that I read through sounded quite real or true. It's not that I had like a spiritual revelation. It's not that my life has transformed, but it was enough just to get me interested. So I went back home after India, and I went to see my aunts living in a small village in Israel. And as I was telling them how much I've enjoyed India and that I'd met a couple of monks and it was pretty interesting and quite exotic, they said that one of the village members, a childhood friend of mine, has just came back from Tibet, and they said that she completely went crazy. It's kind of crazy, batshit crazy. She's into Buddhism. She's living in a monastery, poor parents. She's never going to get married. She's kind of, she joined the cult. She's now a Buddhist. And I said, well, I'm not like that. Worry not, it's not going to happen to me. I'm not like that. But immediately I went to see her, I took a break and went to see her. So she was not living in a cult. She was not living in a monastery. She was actually living at Dharamsala in India, renting a place and going to classes at the local library and just studying Buddhism. So she was there in Israel because she came to, with a friend, to organize a visit, the first visit of a Buddhist nun, an American nun, but in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, that was given Buddhist teachings for the first time in Israel. So, I had a time. And I joined a 10-day meditation course, and this is how I started. And again, it wasn't like a spiritual revelation. It's not that kind of, I've discovered my true self, but it was interesting enough to just keep me going. And I started to go to India every year, attending teachings with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and studied foundational Buddhism at the Tibetan library, that hosted a couple of Tibetan monks that gave teachings on Buddhist philosophy to a group of foreigners. So this is how I started. And I was a software engineer at the time, working for the Israeli army. And after 12 years of doing that, I got totally bored. I was 30. I guess I had my early midlife crisis when I was 30. So I decided to leave my job and go to India again to hang out for a few months. And I met a girl, as it happens. And we stayed in India. We stayed. And then I started to learn Tibetan. I met someone that became my closest teacher, who spoke only Tibetan. And I had a time and I thought, well, if I study Tibetan, I'd be able to talk to him. So I took some Tibetan classes. Then 2 years have gone by, and I didn't want to go back to my life as a software engineer. And I was still in India. I was still in love with that girl from Ireland. So I heard about this program for translators, and I had nothing else to do. So I just joined a program for translators, which was quite an extensive program for 2 years. And towards the end of those 2 years, I was quite fed up in India, because it was, India can be really intense. Sharon has lived in India for how many years? 15 years. So Sharon knows how intense it can be. So, I needed a break. And I got one day an email from Chenrezig Institute. I knew the previous translator here at the center, and he recommended the center to invite me over to become the resident interpreter. And I thought, why not take a couple of years break from India? Come here to Australia. It was never on the cards. I never had any interest in coming to Australia. It was never on my radar. But I needed a break from India. So I came over. And what I've discovered was that the things that a center like that offers a community of foreigners that wanted to study Buddhist philosophy, in some sense, suited me and suited many of my friends way better than what I got in India. In a sense, the people that come from our background, when we get into Buddhism or Tibetan Buddhism, as this is a Tibetan Buddhist center, we encounter Buddhism that belongs, first of all, to a different culture, different tradition, different language, and people have their own way of doing things. And the Tibetan culture, the Tibetan tradition has its own checks and balances that make sure that people are educated and trained in the right way. But it works for Tibetans. For us, it works to a lesser degree. We have, in some sense, to find our feet. We have teachers that give us directions, but still the directions are given to us mostly in Tibetan, sometimes with a lack of knowledge of our cultural dispositions, cultural and social orientation. So we get instructions, but we still have to find a fit in incorporating those instructions into our daily life. So I was in India and I was taking different classes and different teachings, but for me, for many years, it was quite a lot of patchwork. So you take a class in one subject and it sounds really attractive. It sounds really true. Then you go to another class and you hear another topic, and that also sounds completely taking, completely inspiring. That also sounds true. But then in terms of how do you apply to your spiritual life, how do you apply to your spiritual practice, it's not easy to figure it out. I think that what was lacking for someone like me was an introduction that was telling me where I should be studying, how should I be developing my spiritual practice, and how do I progress during the years from point A to point B to point C and so forth. I had to figure it out for myself, and I didn't have the knowledge to do it by myself. I mean, you need to know so much. You need to do so many years of study to be able to figure it out for yourself. I think that it's not only with the Buddhist tradition like that. I guess that in so many other things that we do, either from a spiritual practice perspective or from a normal social perspective, cultural perspective, academic perspective, we first of all need to gather a lot of knowledge in order to then set a plan in motion, to define priorities, to define goals, to work up a plan to get there. You need to know enough to be able to do that. And the same thing, of course, works with Tibetan Buddhism. And as I said, it's such a vast tradition that has so many different writings and so many different topics and so many ways that you can develop your mind. So I came here to Chenrezig Institute in 2005. And a few weeks after I arrived here, suddenly it dawned on me that what I missed in India is here, in a sense that I could study at the foot of a Tibetan Lama, a Tibetan Geshe, that has done the study himself. And the center was offering a study program that started from point A and led the students from point A through all the right stages or the correct stages to the end point with the right knowledge. And then we had to figure out what we do with this knowledge and how we implement it in our daily life. So in that sense, I can say that, for me, I'm like a gold digger. It was kind of, for me, a good position. I was here as a translator. I was forced to go to classes. I couldn't bail out when it was hard. I couldn't bail out when when I was tired. I couldn't bail out when I was confronted with my own mind and my own hiccups and so forth. Just had to do the whole thing, which paid off. And I think that it also not only paid off for me, I think that also for many people here in this community, it's still, it had paid off. It is paying off. And I think that it continues to pay off in our spiritual practice. But still, we're in this awkward position or awkward point in time where we've met Buddhism. I think that for most of us, we've met Buddhism in a later stage of our life. Dechen, how old were you when you came across Buddhism?
29.
29. Are we like completely into it right from the beginning, or was it like on and off thing?
Yep. No, I was one of these when my sister introduced me to Buddhism. I thought that somebody had given me a key to happiness. That was really a very strong feeling for me at the time.
So have you unlocked the door?
Yeah, it really did unlock the door to
All right.
a way to be happy.
All right. I hope that it hasn't slammed shut.
Pardon?
It didn't slam shut.
No. And
All right.
through practicing, going to teachings and practicing, as I was reflecting in my, the prayer-a-thon today,
Yeah.
is that I have been a part of a lineage of success. That I truly, for me, the Lord Buddha's teachings and all, what we've been talking about is a lineage of success. You practice it, you will be successful.
So then, I think that when in conversations that I have with fellow friends, Buddhists, lay people and monastics, I think that still many of us encounter Buddhism either when we are in our late 20s, but many when they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s. And we already come with a certain cultural and social background. I wouldn't say baggage, but we already, we were trained and educated in a school system conditioned by our culture and environment. So our starting point is very different. We're taught to think as individuals, to make our own decisions, to own our own decisions, and also we don't necessarily take instructions from others. Whereas the Tibetan culture, Tibetan Buddhist culture, the Tibetan culture of monasticism works very different. So when the Buddha was alive and giving teachings 2,600 years ago, a community of Buddhist monks and nuns have evolved around the Buddha, and the whole setup of monastic life was set as a communal monastic way of life. Monastics should live in communities because communities of monastics, first of all, support each other in their spiritual endeavor, in the study and practice and so forth, but it also offers a sense of protection for one's own monastic life. And also over the centuries in India and other places that monasticism has traveled to, Buddhism have traveled to, relationship between monastic communities and the lay community were formed and institutionalized in a particular way. So this is new here. First of all, we don't have big, thriving monastic communities outside of the Tibetan tradition. And of course, we have a monastic community here at Chenrezig Institute. We have monastic communities in Europe, in a couple of places in Europe, but the communities are small. Communities are small and not solid enough to offer security or to ensure that those monastic communities will continue to thrive for centuries to come or for decades to come. We're still quite fragile. And we're fragile because, first of all, I think we live and operate in society that is by and large not a Buddhist society. And also we don't have any expectations for everyone to become Buddhist, which is actually quite nice about Buddhism, because Buddhism does not, it does not promote conversion. Of course, you can become Buddhist if you want. We became Buddhist, but it's not that converting people to Buddhism is what we should do. It's not that we should go out and interact with the community in order to turn people into Buddhism. His Holiness the Dalai Lama often says that people should stay in the culture or religion that they feel most comfortable with, because it is very likely that it will work best for them. So if you find out that Christianity works best for you, stick with that. If you find out that Islam works for you, stick with that. There are ways to develop one's mind in one's own tradition without forcing yourself to convert to another religion. So Buddhism also does not promote conversion, of course, but if you do want to, if you are interested in developing your mind, if you are interested in Tibetan Buddhist tradition, well, come along. So we have communities, but the communities are not necessarily supported by the general public in the way that they are supported by the community in other Buddhist countries, like all across Southeast Asia. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that since we were conditioned from very young age to think for ourselves and to make our own decisions, although I think that as a Buddhist monastic, I want to live in a monastic community just like the Buddha spoke of, just like the Buddha taught. I find kind of constantly that in the conflict of I want to make my own decisions, I want to own my own decisions and not do what my community expects me to do. And I think that for most of us, it's like that. And we have to make compromises, right? So we have to think of what will be the greater good for the community. And are we willing to give up our own way of thinking in certain areas in order to promote the well-being of the community? And that's a really difficult thing because we always think that we know what is right for us. No one should tell us what to do. Do you find that that's also your own experience?
That's been a huge issue over the 30 years. Really, it is. We are definitely taught to think for ourselves.
Yeah.
It's a big part of our culture.
Yeah. So, I'm bringing up this point because I just thought that it's an interesting point in time where Buddhism is completely new in this environment. We're forming communities, but the community, I think, that cannot function in a way that Buddhist communities function in Southeast Asia because the cultural background is completely different. What would be the way of moving forward? I don't know. It's like very early to know, very early to know whether we're going to be able to survive as a Buddhist community, not only as a monastic community, but Buddhist community in general. But certainly we are making our ways in developing our way of interacting with Buddhism. But what it requires us of us is to think out of the box, so to think out of ourselves, to see whether we can train ourselves not just to think of individually of our own needs and wishes and wants and ideas and so forth, but also to think of, can I make a decision that will have a lesser impact on my community? It's pretty hard. It's hard for me, kind of someone that has a bigger ego. So, I always think that what I know is true, that what I know is correct, that I'm right and others are not as right as me. So, this process of thinking is a mind training in itself, which is not easy. Often you're confronted by your own selfishness or by your own righteousness, and sometimes it's kind of pretty, I guess, disturbing to find out after some time in hindsight that we're totally wrong in reading a certain situation. But this is part of our kind of daily challenges in a community such as this. Now, when I say that this is part of our daily challenges, I don't mean to say that it's all grim and difficult. Actually, I think that when I think of the people that I interact with on a normal basis, we share so many values together. We have common values. And sometimes even if we have slight disagreements between us in the way that we want to promote a certain issue, still, when you think of our common values, the things that I share with people here in the community and outside, people that live in Resident Institute or my Buddhist friends in other parts of the world, I have more in common with them than with other people in other places. So I'm saying that because this is the basis upon which we communicate with each other. We operate with each other. We form friendships and so forth. And I try to keep that in mind whenever we have some disagreement or conflict and so forth, because conflicts and disagreements are part of the fabric of society, isn't it? This is what happens to us as human beings in society. Not always we agree with each other. So it's always good to remind ourselves that at the end of the day, we have common values. We have common goals. We do pursue the same thing, which is our own spiritual enlightenment. We want to develop positive qualities to our own mind, to make the most out of our own potential, and to eliminate all the negative traits from our mind. We want to eliminate anger. We want to eliminate pride and jealousy and hate and all those negative traits of mind, and we can do that. So in that sense, we have very common ground that all of us can work with each other. So what I'm trying to train myself is always to recognize those common values, common goals, common ground, rather than think of the ways in which we sometimes disagree with each other. So it's hard, particularly because we also, I think, at this point in time, living in the 21st century, it seems that we're surrounded by things that are designed to get our attention and create some form of division, and that's a way of controlling our minds. In a sense that, first of all, when you look at social media, that thrives at creating some conflicts, passing on information that is not necessarily true. It is a tool that is used to develop a greater sense of confusion, division between people. And even if it was not designed to do that from the very outset, that's still what happens at this point in time. And it's still it is what rules the world. So our minds are so swiftly and powerfully influenced by things that we get from the outside. When I drive somewhere, I constantly get those messages, either direct messages or subliminal messages from the radio, from my phone, from billboards, from shops that I go to, telling me what I need to buy, what I need to get, how I need to live in order to feel good, in order to feel a whole person, a holistic person. And it's really hard to shut your mind to all that outside input and sort out what are the things that are valuable to you, or that you want to go with in terms of your spiritual development. So we live at a difficult time. It's hard to make sense of all of it. We're trying to develop our mind as individuals, but also to support each other in a community like that in order to make sure that we do not become crazy. I mean, we're already crazy to a certain degree, that we do not exacerbate our madness. So I guess that kind of the cultural and spiritual difference, let's say, between ourselves and Tibetan culture or Asian culture in general is one of the challenges that we work with. Another one is trying to find a fit in terms of how do we fit into the big Tibetan Buddhist world. I mean, the way that I look at myself as a monk in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition is that I'm part of the Tibetan tradition, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, but I'm also very much outside of this tradition. Tibetans have been doing what they've been doing for centuries. They have a way of working with their communities. They communicate in Tibetan. Although I'm fluent in Tibetan, still there are so many things that I do not know and I do not understand about the Tibetan culture, Tibetan tradition. And Tibetans have sometimes such a complicated way of stating certain things. They would say something directly to you, but there is an indirect implication to what they say. And you need to be so versed in the culture in order to know what they mean when they say a particular thing. So it's almost like A is never A. Can be A plus, can be A plus B. And you have to sometimes figure out what they say and why they say it in a particular way. And it's like that in any culture. You go out and learn another language, you get yourself immersed in another culture. You always have to make your way in finding out the intricacies of that culture. So we became Buddhists. I became a monk. Dechen became a nun, and we have many other members in our community, but it's not necessarily that we are part of the Tibetan community. We're very much outside of the Tibetan community. Not only we're outside of the Tibetan community, but sometimes what I find, which is quite hilarious, is that I think that most of us here have done some Buddhist studies to a degree that is even more than what people in lay Tibetan community do. We became Buddhists because we were, to begin with, interested in Tibetan Buddhism. It's different to someone that was born into that tradition. It's like, in some sense, you can say that you can be born into a Christian family, or you can convert into Christianity. And when you convert into Christianity, you do it because you're keenly interested in doing that. So you have an invested interest. You want to know more. you know, you want to investigate the way that you can practice Christianity and make yourself the best practitioner that you can be. And the same thing also happens to us when we become Buddhists, right? So it's not that this is how we were born or grew up in. We want to make sure that we become a good Buddhist practitioner to our best ability. So then sometimes, you know, I find out, you know, we, after having studied for, you know, however many years, I go to India and visit some of my friends, and I happen to be speaking with like, you know, a Tibetan old person, and they try to educate me and show me the right way to be a Buddhist practitioner, which of course, you know, me with a sense of pride, thinking that I've done more study than you, then, you know, I know better than you how to be a good Buddhist. But no, we always, I think that in that sense, we always, even though we're, you know, even though I'm a monk, even though we have nuns also here, sometimes when we meet people from the Tibetan community, we're still considered to be outsiders. And we're outsiders, but also insiders. And also in this community, you know, I go down to the plaza, Sunshine Plaza, wearing a red skirt. You know, people look at me. You know, I'm also outside of this community. It's not that kind of it's not that I have any issues with that, but we find ourselves in situations, particularly if you're a monk and a nun, where you don't necessarily belong to Tibetan community because you don't speak the language, it's not your culture. But also wearing this is not like a great fashion statement. You know? So we don't belong also necessarily to mainstream communities here in Australia or elsewhere. So we still have to find our ways. And I think that over the years, I've discovered that people that have decided to become monks and nuns are people, many of them are people that had strong personalities before becoming monks and nuns. You know, I think that sometimes you need to have a strong personality to know what you want to do, and also kind of to be able to swim against the stream, or to not care if people look at you when you wear a red dress, when you're kind of walking in the street. You need to kind of to have a certain personality to not care about those things. So I find that people that can do that, and also that can do that over many years, are people that I think have kind of a stronger personality, for good and also for bad. You know, if you have a strong personality, it means that kind of you're sometimes giving people shit, or that you're creating problems for people. So that's one of the challenges that we have. You know, how do we make our way with having strong personality, thinking that we know how to do things, but also not belonging necessarily in this camp or the other camp. So we're creating new camps, like here at Chenrezig Institute. We have our own Chenrezig Institute monastic team. We're trying to be a cohesive team. But the challenge is that it's difficult to work out your priorities, in a sense that when you think of a common goals, I guess that the final goal is to become enlightened, to become a Buddha. To become a Buddha, it means that we want to develop our mind to a point in which the mind has no faults whatsoever, no ignorance, no anger, no attachment, no jealousy, no pride. It has absolute also positive qualities, absolute knowledge, wisdom, compassion, love, patience, generosity, ethics, mindfulness, and so forth. We want to develop those states of mind to an utmost perfection. It's possible to do it, but then how do we start? So Tibetans, as I said, Tibetans have been studying that for more than thousands of years. Geshe studied that for 30 years, day in and day out, for so long. Then you had those yogic practitioners, tantric practitioners, or other meditators that have been doing lifelong meditations generating realizations. We are not there yet. First of all, in order to create a big and thriving community, it doesn't have to be big. In order to develop a thriving and working community that would be able to still carry Buddhism with it for generations to come, and to make it solid and true and workable, you need to have people that are knowledgeable and people that have realizations. If you have the knowledge, but you don't develop spiritual realizations, Buddhism will not thrive. if you try to just go into retreat, but you neglect all the wealth of scriptures that the Buddha gave, your realizations would be limited. You might be able to develop good concentration. You might be able to develop a heightened sense of compassion, but without the broad knowledge of all the teachings that the Buddha gave, but also the vast teachings that were given by the great Indian masters, would not be able to provide service to others and also for ourselves for decades to come, for centuries to come. Now, someone needs to hold all those teachings as scriptures and as realizations in order to create big and thriving Buddhist communities. So we are not there yet. We have people that are studying. We have people that have been doing studies for quite a few years, but we're still at the early stages of our education system. To be able to study like Tibetans do, you need massive institutions. You need to have many people that you can debate with, many people that you can discuss with, many people that will make you think out of the box and make sure that you become confronted with your own ideas, with your own philosophical views, with your own understanding. If there's no one that pushes your button, if there's no one that asks you questions, if there's no one that is trying to undermine what you believe in, your spiritual progress would be inhibited, would be limited. If you don't have people that go into longer retreats and develop their own spiritual realizations, and they can share the spiritual realizations, guide others in a way that is suited to their cultural and spiritual conditioning and habituated, also that would be quite difficult to pass on to future generations. So then we try to work a way in doing that. So we have great study programs in a center like this. So we have, for example, a center like this, we have entry-level spiritual programs. We have medium-level spiritual program, in-depth spiritual program. But when I say in-depth, it's like we do, for example, a 5-year study program, which is great. We study for 3 days a week, sometimes 4 days a week, and we have a morning session, an afternoon discussion, and then another tutorial, and sometimes we do exams. So it's great. But then when you think of the Geshe study that they do in Tibetan monastery over 20 or 30 years, where that's all day long, and you debate it back and forth. I mean, what we do is just a fraction of how far and deep you can go with the knowledge that you can develop of the teachings that the Buddha gave. So in order to do something that is similar to what Tibetans are doing, it's not that we have to do exactly the same, but we can try to reach the same depth. We need, first of all, text. It needs to be translated into our local languages. Here it's English. We need to have people that teach us in our languages or with adequate translation. But when you go with translations, you're always limited. You're getting something second-handed. Now, when I think of my first early years of translation, first of all, I did a terrible job, I think, for most of the things. But also, whatever I translated for was based upon my limited understanding. It was on-the-job training. I was learning as I was translating, and obviously, you start with some portion of knowledge. You translate according to what you think the point is. And then after a while, you discover that actually you got it wrong, and you need then to go back and make amendments. So when you study something through a translation, I think that you're always limited, even if you have a good translator. So now to be able to have a good foundation, a very deep foundation in what the Buddha said, you either need to have many people that study that in Tibetan, or to have a Tibetan teacher that is so good in English that would be able to teach Buddhism to a very subtle degree with all the debate material and all the philosophical points that will be able to impart that vast amount of knowledge in a way that is incorrect. And you also have to have a big enough community of students that would be committed to do that. So let's look at our lifestyle. Just a second, let's look at our lifestyle. Our lifestyle does not support that. Our lifestyle does not support people that would be willing to invest 10 years of their life, 20 years of their life without making an income, sometimes without being able to support the family, or to start a family, right? So this way of study is not only for monastics, also a layperson can do that. But, to be able to invest that time and money and effort in doing that, it's almost impossible for us, isn't it? Not only that, we live in a society that, people have less and less time to do whatever they want. We work more, we earn less, we consume more. And the things that we consume make us actually more busy rather than giving us free time. I think that when in the early stage of the development of the internet and mobile phones and those integrated systems, there was that idea that if we'd be able to do everything from our phone or from our computer, banking and bills and so forth, we'll have so much free time to develop our personal interest and our hobbies and our spirituality and so forth. But I think that what we're discovering now is that actually we have less time to do what we want. We are more addicted to our phones and bank accounts and work and other things that we do that we hardly find any time to develop our mind. I mean, when we look at this, for example, this center, when I came here 15 years ago, there were people that were living here in tents for weeks and months on end, going to teachings. And there was this great enthusiasm in doing that because it was something that was not available before. But then over the years, I think that it became more and more difficult. People have less time to do it. Now, we used to offer weekend courses. Then over the years, we found out that people kind of find it hard to commit to a weekend course, to commit to 2 days. If you then try to make it rather than a weekend course, to do it a day course, more people can do it. Now we find that even to do a one-day course is hard because people find it difficult to commit to even to doing 1 day. If we do a half day, even better. So I think that this is indicative of what our lifestyle now in the 21st century. We have less time, our minds are more busy, and to develop the same knowledge, the similar knowledge that Tibetan have held in their monasteries, in their communities, becomes something that is almost impossible for us.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the points you're bringing up, and it's something that I've been thinking about myself. The relationship between the monastic lifestyle of the Tibetans and the immersion. I mean, it's sort of is a like immersion. They totally immerse themselves in it from around Geshe Sultan. He joined the monastery at 12.
Yeah.
So, and he became a Geshe at what, about 28, 29 or something like that?
Oh, I would say, let me think, probably when he was in his mid-30s or late 30s. Yeah, mid or late 30s.
Yeah. So his whole life has been totally immersed into it. Now, that's not our experience at all here in the West. What you and I are doing, what you have done is the closest that we will get to immersion, becoming monastic and joining the community. But it just makes me wonder whether that means that our capacity to have realizations is any less than their ability to have realizations through their immersion. And it's sort of I just wonder whether there is maybe, because I suspect that even when you're immersed, those in the monasteries, when they're totally immersed, that they don't all become great profound issues, so that they don't locking out, either boredom or whatever. That even in that immersion system, when you really do dare back yourself, it still requires a lot of energy from your own soul, which we can do within our way, our way of studying as well, and that the realizations come about from the level of our aspiration. That there is a relationship between our desire, our will to really want to succeed, and the amount of effort that we put into trying to realize those aspirations is directly in proportion to the actual realizations we will receive.
Yeah. Which is also kind of, you brought up also an interesting point that also I wanted to touch upon. When I think that for most of us, our entry point to the Buddhist tradition is to, we discover what the Buddhist tradition says about the mind, about our disturbing emotions, anger, attachment, and so forth. And I think that for most of us, our initial orientation is how to use the Buddhist tradition, the Buddhist teaching, in order to try to make our mind better in this life, how to make it more comfortable in this life, how can I be a better person in this life. So most of us were not brought up in a society or culture that believes in future lifetimes, so that takes future lifetimes to be the bare minimum priority that you have in your spiritual progress. So from a Buddhist perspective, this lifetime is just a short, incidental lifespan. Your initial priorities should be concerned with what will occur to you in your future lives. And then what will occur to you after that? How will you be able to develop your mind to the point in which it is completely free from anger, attachment, and so forth, and has an awesome set of good qualities, and all the way through to the point in which your mind becomes completely enlightened. So we do not begin our spiritual path. Most of us don't begin a spiritual path in thinking necessarily, how will I become a Buddha in the future? We think of, how do I make this life better? How do I feel more comfortable in this life? How do I feel less miserable, less depressed, more happy, more compassionate, more tolerant, and so forth? I think that for most of us, this is where we begin. And our priorities normally are in terms of, we go to teachings, we want to use the teachings to make this lifetime be better, more tolerable or happier. The more we study, I think that the more we're capable of making amendments in terms of our priorities. Our priorities change over the years, and we start to think of what will occur to me in future life. What will occur to me beyond that? How can I become liberated? How can I become Buddha? And then we become more enthused about doing that. But still, and we have, I think that the power of our enthusiasm pushes us to do something about it. But often I think that it's quite hard to get it to the point in which we do develop great and deep realizations. It's not that it's impossible, but everything, it seems that it's stacked up against us. It's waking up against us. I mean, to begin with, since we have encountered Buddhism in a later stage of our life, I find that I'm so used to our way of living, living in a developed country, in an affluent society. It's hard for me to get by on less. I'm a monk, but it's really difficult to get by on less, to kind of get by in conditions that are not that comfortable or conducive. Now, sometimes if I break a fingernail, I go into a pout. It's like, it's almost like, being like, a bourgeois, decadent Buddhist practitioner. It's like we're so used to those kind of good living conditions that, yeah, kind of when I think of sleeping in a box for, for three years, it feels of, let alone kind of not being able to survive a month like that. Will I be able to survive a night? So, we can develop realizations, but the thing is that you need to be absolutely convinced that you can become enlightened, to be absolutely convinced that you can be liberated, to the point in which you think that if I be able to do it, and to give up all those, to relinquish all those comforts and addictions that we have to small things in life. If I completely dedicate my life to only doing that, I will be able to develop realizations. It's hard for us to get that, so we do relinquish some things, and we can develop small realizations, but in terms of deep level foundations, I think that it's getting harder and harder. It's not impossible, but it's harder, I think.
Thinking about, I know it's not Buddhist, people like Kartsön, who just had a moment in time of becoming enlightened or having a huge realization. In the Buddhist tradition, is that considered not possible? Is it what you're talking about is so much length of time and so much depth into it, so with all the texts, we'll never get there. Or is there a space for, I guess, like a level of intensity or a flash realization to happen? Like what is your think about that?
So it's an interesting question, because first of all, Buddhism is not like one unified tradition. There are different approaches. And one interesting point in time in history was around the 7th century, where a famous debate took place in Tibet. The debate is called Samya Debate. And at that point in time, Tibet already had some Buddhist influence. So there was a migration of Buddhist scholars along the Silk Road, traveling from Mongolia and Tibet and China and so forth. So there was already some Buddhist influence in Tibet. And then also Buddhism from India started to make its way to Tibet. So there were two basic approaches. Now I'm kind of simplifying that historical event, but there were two basic approaches: the gradual approach, gradualism, or the sudden approach, sudden enlightenment. This debate that took place had to decide which of the approaches is going to be the approach that will take place in Tibet, the gradual approach or the sudden approach. So they brought, the story tells that they brought a Chinese monk, they brought a Buddhist monk, and they had to debate between them. And the person that would win the debate would be the person that will decide which form of Buddhism would take root in Tibet. So the gradual Buddhism took root in Tibet at the end of that debate. It doesn't mean that there are no other traditions that speak of this sudden approach to enlightenment. So Japanese tradition, for example, I think that has this, with the system of koans and so forth, breaking conceptual constructs, cutting through conceptual constructs and developing realizations through that. So I think that even though the Tibetan Buddhist tradition says that you cannot have instantaneous enlightenment, like in one instant, that you have to go in a gradual manner, it doesn't mean to say that now we have to discard all the other traditions, Buddhist traditions, and say that therefore they're not valid. I think that when you look at what other traditions do, and I think that maybe Eckhart is speaking of something that is similar to that, you can get small breakthrough, which also I think that at least from a Tibetan Buddhist perspective, this is the way that I look at it. We all come to this life with imprints that we have planted in our minds from in past lifetimes. So we might have the breakthrough in this life, but it also depends upon what we had, what we've planted before. So whether you can become fully enlightened in one moment, I'm not sure. I'm not saying definitely not, but I doubt it. Whether you can develop realizations of different things in one moment, I think that why not? If you have the imprints to do that, you suddenly can get an insight into a particular reality. And it can be such a fundamental realization of a particular reality that it will be a deep funded realization. So you can kind of have like a small portion of enlightenment that is developed in your own mind. So I think that that's possible. It's like no.
That's the sort of thing I was talking about too.
Yeah.
The developing realizations. In other words, it's just a light bulb moment.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by realizations. It's a light bulb moment when you've had teachings, then you sit and contemplate about it, and then you sit and you meditate on it, and all of a sudden it really becomes real. It really becomes real within you, and it's something that then informs your behavior. That it's a background, it becomes a reality for you in the way it informs your behavior and the way you are with others.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, I think that that's possible, and that's happening. I think that it's happening to, hopefully, it is happening and or will happen to all of us. Monastics and lay people alike, that we will start to develop realizations. It'd be fantastic. But I think that in terms of kind of the challenges that we're facing is how to kind of integrate all of that into forming our way of Buddhist life Buddhist with a community, with a Buddhist community or institution that would be able to sustain itself for many years to come. I think that it's still early stages. We don't know how it will develop, but that's part of the I guess, challenges that we're facing. And sometimes when you don't have a lot of knowledge, it's difficult to work out the priorities. What should be your priorities? And one of the teachers that I used to work with had an interesting way of looking at it. He said that we have here, for example, we studied for 3 years here the philosophical view of a school of thought that is called the Middle Way School of Thought, the Madhyamika School of Thought. It was an in-depth study program. It was not easy. It was quite challenging. And Geshe Jaming, the teacher, kind of was saying very often, don't think about it in terms of what you're getting from it. Think about it in terms of, I'm now studying so that I'm creating an opportunities for other people to study that in the future. Not just in 10 years from now, but because I'm studying now this material, and some of the things are become available in English. We have meditation manuals. We have texts that are being produced by us. People will be able to access that in 50 years from now, in 100 years from now. So you think that actually you're studying now not for your own sake, but for people that will be here 100 years from now or 200 years from now. It's pretty hard to think about it like that, right? When you go through different difficulties, when you find material quite challenging, to think that I'm not doing it just for myself, just to make this life more enjoyable, or my mind more enjoyable. I'm studying like that. I'm enduring all those things in order to make sure that I create a pathway for this to remain with us for many generations to come. So it's hard to think about it like that. It's hard for me. When I decide, when I think of what I'm going to do in the next 5 years, what I'm going to do in the next 10 years, I have, I think, greater freedom to decide what I'm going to do because I'm a monk. I don't have a family that depends upon me. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have people that I have to report to, so to speak. I can make my own decision in a very limited way, particularly now in the COVID-19 world. But still, it's hard to think of what am I going to do to make it possible for other people to enjoy it in 100 years from now. I'm more inclined to think about it, to think of what can I do in order for it to work for myself, to feel happy, to feel comfortable, to feel satisfied. Thinking of others is still work in progress. Anyway, I've said quite a few things. I'm wondering if you have more questions or more points.
What made you, what made you choose to go from exploring and studying Buddhism and being here to becoming a monk? What was the decision point?
So I didn't have, when I decided to become a monk, I didn't have like, it wasn't like, it wasn't a revelation for me. So at the back, when I started to get involved with Buddhism, I attended some meditation courses mostly with nuns, with foreign nuns in the Tibetan traditions. At the back of my mind, I thought that in the future, maybe one day I'll become a monk. But it was just like, this romantic fantasy. It wasn't really a kind of well thought of process. And then at some point I thought that, my parents were still alive and they were pretty concerned. I left a good job, being a software engineer. All my friends were getting married and having 2.2 kids, and they were getting mortgages and so forth. My parents wanted me to be normal. And it was so hard for them that I kind of left my job and left kind of a good paying job, and I was living in India, and then I was kind of going into Buddhism. They thought I've joined a cult. They were not interested in Buddhism, so they were interested in me being normal. And even when I became a translator, they never asked me what Buddhism is about. It was okay, they didn't want to know, and it's okay, but for them it was the great fear. So I thought that if I became a monk and they knew about it, it would be like the whole world will come down on them. They'd be probably so devastated. So I thought that I'll wait with that. Just wait. They were getting old. They were sick. I knew that they were it's not that they're going to live for 20 or 30 years from now. I thought I can become a monk once they're not there. Passed away. My parents passed away. And I was here, no, I've been living here, and I know most of my friends here in the community were monks and nuns, or also other lay people. But I was living in the same house with a Tibetan Lama, and I was starting to think that, well, this way of living actually suits me, in a sense that this want to do for the rest of my life, in a sense of studying Buddhism, practicing Buddhism, living in community like that. So why not? But it wasn't like something that one day occurred to me that, I have this life mission to become a monk, or kind of a self-revelation. So I thought of becoming a monk. And then the interesting thing was that I had that plan for many years. And then I thought that if I were to become a monk and take the monastic vow from someone, I want to take it from a teacher that I really respect, that I really, not just from a random person that kind of I hear that is giving the monastic vow, and therefore I can take it from the person, but to take it from someone that I feel very connected to, so that, in times of challenges or difficulties, if I think about that person and I know that I've taken the vow from that person, it will be something that will help me to deal with difficulties. So I went to India and met with Taisita Rinpoche, the person that I took the vow from, and he agreed to give me the vow. And a few years after that, when I heard that he was giving the vow, and I looked at my schedule and I saw that I can go to India, fly in, get ordained, fly out. Then I started to get to panic, to get really stressed about it, to freak out. Because you can go on a automatic pilot kind of, cruise control mode in the Buddhist world without really thinking of what are the things that you believe in. So you hear about refuge, you think about karma, you hear about past and future lifetimes and compassion and so forth. Everything makes sense, but on a very superficial level. If you don't ask yourself the questions deeply, you can go on, at least I was going on for so many years, on a very superficial level. Then when I knew that I can go to India and get ordained, then I started to ask myself, what if future lifetimes do not exist? I believe in some, of course, I believed in on a certain level that future lifetimes exist, but then I said, but what if they do not exist? What if it's not possible for me to be liberated? What if it's not possible for someone to become a Buddha? So I started to freak out, and I had, I think, 6 weeks or 7 weeks before ordination. So I still locked it in. I bought a flight ticket and made a regimen to go to India. I kept it a secret from most people. I think that maybe only 3 people knew about it, because I wanted it to be my decision. I didn't want people to influence my decision, to tell me that they always knew that I were to become a monk, or that, it's for me and they always knew that, and I've made such a good decision, or vice versa, that it was such a mistake. And anyway, to cut things short, I went to India, and I was still freaking out. I was doing every day, I was waking up, freaking out, doing meditations, looking at my mind, asking myself whether I truly believe that it's possible to be liberated and so forth. And I was making my way through those doubts. And even when I became ordained, it's not that I removed all the doubts. Let's say that I was 98% sure that this is the right way to go. And I left 2% of uncertainty in my mind. I think that, that uncertainty still exists somewhere on different levels, coming up at different points in time. And it's okay, I can deal with that. But still, I went along with that. And one thing that I've discovered was, now I've been living here in a monastic community, or amongst monastics, for, let's say, 10 years before I became a monk. And even before that in India, I had many friends, Tibetans and non-Tibetans, that were monks and nuns. I thought that I knew what being a monk was. I thought I knew what I'm into. And then I've discovered that actually it was quite different. To begin with, my previous girlfriend said that I'm not marriage material, that I have commitment issues, and she was totally right about it. And one thing that I've discovered after becoming a monk, that it's just like getting married. You make a commitment that you're going to become, remain a monk for the rest of your life. And that was like, I think my initial reaction is like, oh my God, I'm married now. It's for the rest of my life. So I think that for a few weeks and months, I was a little bit unsettled. I remember going into elevators or, you know, places where suddenly I saw my reflection in the mirror, kind of a person wearing the robes, and it was still kind of surprising. How did I end up doing it? Not with a sense of regret, but still in a very surprising way. But it took some time for that initial freaking out to subside. And I found out actually that there is a lot of freedom that comes with being a monk. I mean, of course, you have to give up certain things, but you know, when I think of what I had to give up and the liberties that I enjoy, I think that for the time being, it still works very well for me. In a sense that I knew before becoming a monk, I knew what I was interested in, you know, studying Buddhism, Buddhist practice, hanging out with my Buddhist friends. And I was less interested in kind of hanging out with friends, going to the pub, getting married, having relationships or whatever. When you're not a monk, you have to make sometimes excuses. You have to make amendments. You have to find ways to still socialize with people, but not to feel that you're sacrificing something. No, this is something that you have to go. It's a give and take kind of thing in our society. Having become a monk, I found out actually I'm not expected to do whatever other people want me to do. I'm not expected to be what other people want me to be. Of course, I'm expected to be a good monk, or at least a better human being, and I'm trying to do that. But when I hang out with friends here or back home, no one expects me to go out with them to the pub. I don't have to make excuses. I don't have to say, no, it doesn't suit me. And also, I'm off the market. I'm off the relationship market. I'm off the list. There's quite a lot of freedom in that. I'm not expected to go along with that. So I found it, at least for me, quite liberating. And also in terms of making decisions for the future, when I think of what I'm going to do in 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, and so forth, sometimes I think about, it'd be so nice to go again and hang out in Colombia for a few months, for a year, study, to go back into studying Spanish. So it's, I can do that, but then is it really what I should be doing as a monk? It has been to sort out my priorities, not in a way that kind of makes me feel awful or terrible or that I'm giving up something, but it's giving me some orientation in life. What are my priorities? What am I working for? Is that a good decision? The decision is mine, but I have at least some, I think, guidelines in terms of my decision-making process. All right. Should we finish for today? What do you reckon? I don't want to bore you or keep you for too long. Let's finish for now. So for those of you, I think I've seen most of you here before. What's going to happen in the next few weeks, just to give you an update of Chinrezig Institute. So Geshe Tsultrim is going back to teaching the general program on Friday morning at 10:30 in the morning. Then the Thursday evening teachings are moving to Sunday morning, right? So I think that it's easier for people during the weekend. So we're going to pick up the general program also. It's on Sundays at 10:30. We are now trying also to get our act together in introducing some meditation sessions on Thursday evening, on the Thursday evening sessions. So I'm going to be doing 4 weeks of meditating on the 4 immeasurables in February. That's going to be Thursday evening. So if you want to come along, please do. And after that, we're just going to see how things evolve. We're currently working at reduced capacity. So it's hard to find always people to do stuff, but we're trying. So that's what's going to happen in February. Then in March, we're going back to the advanced study program and also continuing with Geshe-la's general teaching. So take a look at our website. We're going to have a new website coming soon, but still with the current website, you can have a look at the calendar and see what's available and come up whenever you want to come up, whenever you have time. So thank you very much for coming. enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.